So up to this point, we've spent a really good amount of time understanding exactly how memory works. We've talked about when you need to return to information so it actually sticks in your brain. But understanding memory is really only half the battle. Now our goal is to make those principles repeatable in your daily life. We're going to move past just understanding how studying works to actually designing your very own personalized study system. Let's walk through this together.
When studying breaks down, we almost always blame a lack of effort. We tell ourselves we just didn't try hard enough. But the truth is, the biggest problem with studying usually isn't effort at all. It's inconsistency. Most students just don't have a reliable system. Instead, they study when they finally feel like it, or when the pressure of an upcoming test forces them to, or just when they happen to think they have enough time. Relying on those feelings makes studying entirely unpredictable, and it makes it really difficult to build any real momentum. So instead of waiting around for motivation or pressure, we need to build structure.
I want you to look at the While You Watch section right at the top of your workbook page. The very first question there asks you to consider this exact idea. We know that a study session needs structure, not just a random amount of time blocked out. So, in your own words, what does a structured study session actually mean to you? Go ahead and pause this explainer right now and write down your answer.
Okay, let's dive into what that structure actually looks like in practice. A strong study session isn't just sitting down and staring at your notes. It follows a really specific pattern. A pattern that your brain can easily recognize and repeat every single time you sit down to work. The backbone of effective studying is incredibly simple. It consists of 3 steps: look, think, and recall.
Step 1 is to look. You begin by looking at the material briefly. Now, to be clear, this is not a long, drawn-out review. It's just enough to orient yourself. You're simply reminding yourself what the topic is today and figuring out exactly where you're starting. You might quickly glance at today's notes or maybe an assignment sheet, really just to set the stage.
Once you're oriented, you move right into step 2, which is think. This is the phase where you actually process the material. You don't just read it, you engage with it. This might mean explaining the concept out loud in your own words. It might mean walking through the steps of a process step by step, or even reorganizing your notes so that the flow makes logical sense to you. This is really all about making the material your own.
Finally, we reach step 3, and this is absolutely the most crucial part: recall. This is where you remove the support, you close your notes, you turn over the textbook, and you try to bring the information back entirely from memory. Remember, that final step is where the actual learning happens, because your brain is being forced to do the heavy lifting. For example, if you're studying math, this looks like closing your notebook and redoing 2 math problems completely from memory, without looking at the solutions at all.
Now let's apply this to your own habits. Look down at your workbook page again, right at question number 2. You'll see the look, think, recall pattern laid out there. I want you to take a moment to write down what each of these specific steps means for you and the way you study. Go ahead and pause the explainer here and fill those 3 lines in. All right, so you have the pattern, but for this pattern to happen consistently, it needs a really reliable starting point. And this is where a start cue becomes incredibly important. A start cue is just an everyday, regular event that signals to your brain that it's time to begin studying. It completely removes the decision-making process. A start cue might be a specific time of day, like seeing the clock hit 7 p.m., or it might be an action in your daily routine, like arriving home and finishing your after-school snack. When the cue happens, the study session begins. The reason this start cue matters so much is that many study sessions actually fail before they even start. And it isn't because students don't care about their grades. It's because they're sitting around waiting to feel ready or waiting to feel motivated. A start cue removes that hesitation entirely. On your workbook page, let's look at questions 3 and 4. Take a moment to answer why a lot of sessions fail before they start, and then define what a start cue is for yourself. Pause the explainer and write that down. Now that we know how to start, we also need to know how to finish. At the end of your look, think, recall process, you need a clear closing action. This is just something simple that wraps up the session. It could be writing a short 1 to 2 sentence summary of what you just learned. It could be putting a star next to the items that need review next time, or jotting down exactly what didn't stick today. The whole point of a closing action is that when you come back to study this subject next time, you aren't starting from 0. You know exactly where you left off.
Let's lock that in. Look at question number 5 in the While You Watch section of your workbook. What is a simple closing action that you could realistically use at the end of each study session? Think about what makes the most sense for you, pause the explainer, and write it down right now.
Now that we
Okay, you have the pieces. Now we're going to put these pieces together to build one simple, repeatable routine. We'll move to the middle section of your workbook page. First, I want you to choose just one class to design a study system for today. Write the name of that class on a line provided. Next, we need to define your specific start cue for this class. Complete the sentence, I will start my study session when I. Make it specific, like when I finish dinner. Then, look at the time block options. How long will this session realistically last? Check the box for 10, 15, 20, or 25 minutes. Go ahead and do those 3 things on your page now. Okay. Now, let's customize the core of your session for this specific class. Under Step 3 on your page, you have blanks to fill in for your look, think, recall plan. For the look step, write down exactly what you will briefly look at the beginning of the session. For the think step, write down how you'll process the material, maybe by reorganizing notes or explaining it aloud. For the recall step, write down how you will practice pulling it from memory without your notes. Finally, for Step 4, write down what your specific closing action will be to wrap it all up. Pause the explainer right here and fill in those blanks to build out your personalized plan.
Excellent. Now let's move to the bottom of the page to the reflection section. I want you to think honestly about your past habits. When your studying breaks down, which part collapses first? Is it your timing, meaning you just don't actually start? Is it your method, meaning you start but you don't use good strategies like recall? Or is it your consistency, meaning you use good methods sometimes, but you just don't do it regularly? Look at question 1 in the reflection section, check the box that applies to you, and then for question 2, explain why you think that part collapses first. Excellent.
To recap, studying is not a random burst of effort. It's a system you can repeat, starting with a clear cue, followed by looking, thinking, and recalling, and finishing up with a simple closing action. Now, go ahead and finish the remaining reflection questions on your Lesson 16.3 workbook page to solidify your plan. In our next lesson, we're going to explore exactly how to handle distractions when they inevitably pop up during these new study blocks. Until then, ask yourself, what is the one small, structured change you can make today that will completely transform the way you learn tomorrow?